Alright, we're gonna play some Havoc Demon Hunter. That's the DPS spec. And before we get into doing a dungeon, we're gonna talk about real quick is instead of doing a heroic Shadowlands dungeon like I've been doing on my other videos, we're gonna be doing the Prepatch special event dungeon, which is Oldemon Legacy of Tyr. If you want to queue for this dungeon, you have to go under specific dungeons here to find it. As part of the Prepatch event quest line, you get the quest to go into the dungeon to find some specific discs or whatever. And then completing this quest, you get to choose for your class a 278 item level weapon, which is essentially a couple tiers higher than a heroic Shadowlands dungeons level. Those will give you 249 item level gear, but this for this special event, the quest item and the gear that drops in the dungeon is 278 item levels. So, very significant item level upgrade. The dungeon content is probably slightly harder than a Shadowlands heroic dungeon, based on if you have similar gear levels, the boss fights feel like they take slightly longer, and some of the enemies in the dungeon seem to do a little bit more damage to you. But it's definitely easier than a Mythic 0 level Shadowlands dungeon, and it's still a tier of gear higher than that, so definitely a good place to go if you want some loot that, assuming you're not already above 278 item level gear. But so there's problems with this dungeon that I want to mention before we get into it. First problem is queuing for the dungeon. This definitely happens on DPS. I don't think it happens for tanks. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't happen for healers. Is if you queue for this dungeon and you don't have the quest, you basically never get into the dungeon. The theory is that it's putting people in the who have the quest in front of the people who don't have the quest. And since there's so many DPS, compared to like tanks, sometimes healers, but mostly because of tanks, there's always more DPS with the quest queuing than tanks are joining the queue, so it never really gets through all the people with the quest that are waiting to get in the dungeon. So the DPS who don't have the quest, just the queue never pops for them, basically. So the moral of the story is, well, Blizzard, fix your fucking game, but also after you get in, don't turn in the quest after your first time through the dungeon. I know you want that 278 item level weapon, but if you want more 278 item level gear, don't turn in the quest, or else you'll never get back into the dungeon through the queue. You can still do a pre-made group and search for it under dungeons, and people still are doing pre-made groups. So it's not like you can't manually go over there and do the dungeon. But as far as the looking for group thing goes, this it'll say like average wait time 2 minutes, and you'll be in the queue for an hour, literally an hour, and it'll have never popped. Whereas if you do have the quest, we'll sit in here, it'll say, okay, in this case, average wait time 1 minute as a DPS, and we will get in not necessarily a minute, it might be like a few minutes, like 3 minutes or something, but we'll get in fairly quickly. Alright, so other problems with the Oldemon dungeon. I don't know what the exact item level you're supposed to be for the dungeon is. Evokers, when they get out of their initial quest line thing, they're at like 226 item level or something like that. But I've seen people at sub 200 eye level queuing for the Oldemon dungeon. So I think it's probably similar to heroic Shadowlands dungeons as far as the requirements to queue into the dungeon. So we're going to enter in here at a similar item level to what I've been doing on my other characters, and thing is, there might be some relatively high geared people in here, because a lot of people are over geared and they're just here for the quest. In this case, these people are looking to be 40 or 50 item levels above me right now. So this is going to be a very quick run through the dungeon. But, yeah. Also, there's a bug with the Oldemon queue, which I'm not sure if it's the same as, I don't know if it's the same bug or a different bug, a separate bug, is that if somebody leaves the group, the queue doesn't find you a new person for the group. You'll, so like I had one where the tank left, and we went through the rest of the dungeon, which was like 20 minutes, without getting a tank. Whereas, obviously, we get into the dungeon within a couple minutes, so it's not like there's no tanks queuing for the dungeon. There's just definitely some kind of bug that's preventing the queue from filling in for people who left the dungeon. So yeah, if the tank or the healer leaves, we're kind of screwed. And yeah, a lot of the times the tank leaves after a couple bosses because they're just here to try to get a specific trinket, I think, from the second boss. So we shall see what happens. Hopefully things go alright.
You know, I think that tussle actually helped clear my head.
But yeah, apart from all that, we're playing Havoc Demon Hunter. Just trying to do some DPS. And Havoc Demon Hunter is very similar to Windwalker Monk. in that you have some very strong abilities on a relatively short cooldown, which give you tons of dungeon DPS. That was bad. So am I still in current segment? Yeah. So the obvious one for Havoc Demon Hunter, comparing to a Windwalker Monk, is the I-beam is similar in functionality to what's it called? The Fist of Fury or whatever it's called on the Monk.
Nice work. That frog has been a real pest.
But also there's a couple other good abilities from talents that you get, or at least that I get in my build over here for the Demon Hunter, which is Wave Tempest does a ton of damage, and Essence Break is not as good, but still definitely worth getting. So I could put on more gear that I have sitting in my inventory to be a closer match to the item levels of these other DPS, but I don't want to get through the dungeon too quickly. So yeah, we're just gonna do what we can here at 206 item level.
What now? All I see are bulls.
Maybe we can find a few treasure maps. We'll have a look while you go on ahead.
So the Havoc Demon Hunter is really strong when it comes to specifically the I-beam and the Lave Tempest, and to a lesser extent the Essence Break. But those are all very strong AoE cooldowns, essentially. Relatively short cooldowns. But what I'm trying to get at is the they are still cooldowns. It's not like the Ret Paladin here, who can just keep building you can keep building what's that called? Holy Power, and then just keep spending it on Divine Storm to do tons of damage. Is this a Fury Warrior? Yeah, Fury Warrior. Similarly, they have more consistent damage, which will do better on mobs that survive a little bit longer. What am I taking all this damage from?
I don't have a target.
Whereas, yeah, for me, Essence Break, the Glaive Tempest, and the apparently I didn't I-beam that pole.
Protocol. Defend.
Those are the main ways I'm doing damage here. I used to not like the Demon Hunter very much because the what was it called?
Enemy marked.
The metamorphosis thing was 4-minute cooldown, I believe, and then now it's a 3-minute cooldown.
Oh, look at all
So
this stuff.
The heroes. You could
it's
be
like
searching for-
easier to justify pressing the button,
We're calling
because I've never really been that great at pressing cooldowns in some cases. But 3 minutes is still long enough that it's like you want to use it on bosses basically, but because it's still the duration of it's still pretty long, 24 seconds. Kill trash packs too quickly, basically. But I think I have a thing where
I need a target.
I'll have to check, double check. But there's a talent where Metamorphosis resets the cooldown of your I-beam, which means you don't want to use the Metamorphosis at the very start of the boss fight. You want to use the I-beam first, get maximum value out of it, and then Metamorphosis. Or else you're not like getting the proper value out of that. Man, why'd I have to get cursed? So yeah, it's like you want to I-beam first, do some damage during that thing, and then Metamorphosis in a boss fight. But if your group is too overgeared, then you don't even get the full value of the metamorphosis in the boss fight. So it's a real annoying situation when that happens. We're gonna save our good AoE stuff here for this next pull. Hopefully he pulls essentially the whole room in this next area. There's just 3 big guys and some small dragon guys on the sides. Yep, that's what I thought. So we want to do big damage, press all the big damage buttons. We can do the hunt. We can do this. Yeah. One of those things where
secret to the aspects regaining their
knowing the dungeon
we cannot allow that to happen.
gives you a good idea of when you should be, what pulls you should be
Disc is lost to time.
saving cooldowns for.
You are about to be.
'Cause I could have I-beamed at the end of the previous pull, but then it wouldn't have been up for that. And our metamorphosis is going to be up here in like 10 seconds. I only used it earlier because I knew with the extra RP stuff it would in this phase you're supposed to stand in these circles and you get a massive haste buff. But yeah. All right.
Your efforts are impressive,
So
but in vain.
206 item level Demon Hunter compared to 249 item level Warrior, and
aspect and Murison shall be.
something slightly higher I think on the Paladin. 260 according to details. So definitely among the best of the melee DPS specs. But I'm not really a fan of the playstyle, I guess, of the Havoc Demon Hunter. So it's definitely always been more of a alt character for me than something that I play a lot. At least the dungeon went smoothly though. Let's look at our boss damage. First boss was a triple boss thing, Lost Dwarves. So we didn't do amazing on that. We did a reasonable amount though. I didn't look at the tank's item level actually. But comparing ourselves to the tank here, because tanks are generally better in AoE than single target damage. We expect tanks to do slightly better than average, like compared to single target bosses on that specific boss fight. So doing this much damage more than a tank is fine for that boss fight. Obviously our warrior and
Proudmoore's finest.
Paladin
At your service.
outperformed me there though. So maybe I could have played a bit better, but we didn't do too bad there. On Bromok, this fight ended really quick. Our buddies did a lot of damage here. I think part of it was I retreated out of the AoE thing, and I think they just stayed in it and did a bunch of damage, which is a decision they made. So boss ended up dying before I could really even do a lot, so that kind of sucked. We could also look at specifically enemy damage taken. Which one is it? This one. Because there's these ads that you see. The Paladin did a bunch of cleave damage on those ads. So those ads aren't very important in that fight, because they just despawn when the boss dies, but also if you kill the totem thing, then then they all get stunned, and I think they even take like extra damage when they're stunned. But yeah, in general, until we get to like mythic difficulty type of stuff, where the ads are going to be something that's a real problem, you only really need to worry about killing the boss on that fight. So yeah, I definitely didn't do very well on that fight either way. But like I said, part of that was me retreating out of the AoE. Let me see, did I actually want to see what fights did I use Metamorphosis in? Metamorphosis 8 seconds, so I only I-beamed on the Lost Dwarves. I'm not very good at remembering to use it every time, so I could have probably done some more damage using that there. On Bromok, I'm pretty sure I didn't use it. Metamorphosis 8 seconds. We go to Sentinel Talandris. I think I used it in this fight. Yeah, 33 seconds. So I used it there. And Braun. This fight ended so fast that I decided not to use it, I think. Yeah, only 8 seconds here. They really smashed Emberon there. Let's see, and then the last boss, Chronolord, I definitely used Metamorphosis. So I definitely did significantly less damage on the fights where I didn't use Metamorphosis. That's not to necessarily say that I should have used Metamorphosis every boss fight. Like Emberon, for example, he was dying super fast. How long was that fight? 33 seconds. So, yeah. I'm not sure if it would have been worth spending that big cooldown there. But yeah. Sometimes that's the way it goes. But yeah, anyways. No, Talandris, I didn't do that well. Embron, I didn't do that well. Colonel Lord Deus, I did better on. I don't know what our Paladin was doing that time, because our Paladin was our highest geared DPS. He was higher geared than the Warrior. But maybe he just didn't know the mechanics or something because of the haste buff from standing in the pools when he's doing the reverse time thing or whatever. But yeah, generally, Havoc Demon Hunter has tons of burst damage from the Eye Beam, from the Glaive Tempest, from the Essence Break, which we will see in the overall data here,
Proudmoore's finest.
which is great for dungeon stuff, but not as great on the single target damage. Especially when you're not using Metamorphosis, but even with Metamorphosis, the Metamorphosis buffs you with a haste buff, which is alright, and it also increases your Chaos Strike, that's your single target Fury Spender, and your AoE Fury Spender Blade Dance. It buffs both of those, but it's not a huge buff. It's like a 30% buff or something like that. And since those aren't the only abilities that you're pressing, it's
Anchors away.
it's not really that great. Also, because it's a haste buff, it's not that great when you're looking at how it affects your cooldown abilities. The Eye Beam cooldown isn't specifically reduced by haste. Your Glaive Tempest cooldown is reduced by haste. So it's alright, I guess, for that one. Essence Break cooldown is not reduced by haste. So since a lot of your damage is this burst damage that isn't reduced by haste, the haste buff on Metamorphosis isn't too amazing. Because it mostly just gives you more Demon's Bites to generate Fury, and then Chaos Strikes to spend Fury. But in the grand scheme of things, those aren't terribly large percentage of your damage. Anyways, let's look at overall data. Top damage is Glaive Tempest. I don't know why this does so much damage, but it does a lot of damage in AoE on a relatively short cooldown. It's not as much damage as Eye Beam, but because the cooldown is like half as long, it ends up being really good. Also, never mind, I was getting confused with the other one. But yeah, Glaive Tempest and Eye Beam end up being your top damage. Now there's a talent over here that you want to have for Eye Beam. Deals guaranteed critical strikes. That is pretty strong, since critical strikes do double damage. I think... Yeah. So there's a talent down here where you gain critical strike damage equal to 100% of your critical strike chance. So this makes crit a very good stat for the Demon Hunter. Assuming you're coming down this left side of the tree. If you're trying to do the weird glaive toss build thing, then you're going to go on the right side of the tree. I'm not really a fan of the idea of glaive toss being, or throw glaive being a strong ability. So yeah, I don't like that stuff over there. So yeah, over here, crit's a good stat. Obviously I have some gear off. So you could definitely get a higher crit chance than 21% very easily. And then that, since that scales your crit chance and your crit damage, it's a very strong stat. Now obviously, since crit chance doesn't matter when you have your I-beam, when you have guaranteed I-beam crits, that makes that a little less useful specifically for I-beam, but because of that talent, you have the crit damage, so get the value out of it. Let's see. So yeah, I don't know if crit though is necessarily the best stat for the Havoc Demon Hunter, but with that talent, it's definitely very strong. I haven't looked at the math on the mastery for a while to know if it's a very good stat, but it buffs chaos damage specifically. And so some of your abilities are physical damage, some of them are chaos damage. Or if you look at Immolation Arrow's fire damage. So, Chaos Strike is, of course, chaos damage. Your Demon's Bite, which generates your Fury, that's physical damage. Fell Rush is chaos damage. Not very much chaos damage, but we have a talent where Immolation Aura makes your next Fell Rush do 500% extra damage. So you do occasionally get a very strong Fell Rush, so it's something to keep in mind. Overall, Fell Rush came out to be 7.2% of my damage, so it's a noticeable amount. Yeah, let's see. I-beam's chaos damage, the Glaive Tempest, and the Essence Break are both chaos damage. I'm not sure if you're taking other talents, if that affects the percentage of your overall damage that ends up being chaos damage. Let's see. Blade Dance is chaos damage also for your primary target, but not for the... Apparently it's physical damage for your AoE part of it, so yeah. There's a lot of chaos damage, but not everything's chaos damage. The hunt is nature damage for whatever reason. Weird. But yeah, so I'm not sure. I haven't done the math. You just add up how much of these things are chaos damage and see whether or not mastery is very good. chances are it's not as good as crit with that talent. I don't think haste is very good. Because of when you have cooldown stuff that isn't affected by haste. The cooldown isn't affected by haste. It's not too good. But also your metamorphosis thing, you have the you have a haste buff from that already. So it's kind of a diminishing returns type of thing, where it's better to have a mix of other stats than stacking tons of haste. So yeah. Yeah. So we Glaive Tempest for lots of AoE damage. We I-Beam for lots of AoE damage. We Essence Break for lots of AoE damage. The Immolation Aura for some AoE damage, but that also gives us a Fell Rush that's empowered from a talent over here somewhere. Activating Immolation Aura increases the damage of your next Fell Rush by 400%. So that gives you a decent amount of AoE damage. I don't think this talent is really worth 2 talent points. So the thing is, to get these, if you wanted either of these 2 talent points down here, you have to put points here. In this case, I am using this Vengeful Retreat, has a 5-second reduced cooldown and generates 80 Fury over 10 seconds. So that's because that gives you 80 Fury per Vengeful Retreat, essentially. That lets you use more Chaos Strikes and less Demon's Bites, basically. So I like that talent. The one under here, Fell Rush, the Hunt, and Vengeful Retreat, increase your damage done by 8% for 5 seconds. That's also pretty good, but the problem is, currently, with the amount of points you have, to get both Glaive Tempest and Essence Break, you have to put the point here to get all this stuff. You can't get this, or let me rephrase. You get this over here, then you can't get the Glaive Tempest. Also, you don't have enough points to get both Glaive Tempest and Essence Break if you spend that point there currently. Now when you get more points at higher levels, then maybe it's better to go here.
At your service.
And I was thinking probably here instead of here, in order to be able to get both the Glaive Tempest and the Essence Break. But for now, doing it like this. Yeah, let's see. Other stuff about talents. I haven't actually looked at this talent tree in a while. So there's a bunch of Blade Dance stuff, which seems to be pretty decent. This Trail of Ruin thing has been around for a little while as a talent. So previously that was definitely good. I assume it's still pretty good. Like I said, there's Throw Glaive stuff and also Immolation Aura stuff that doesn't seem very good. You look at the grand scheme of things, Immolation Aura is only 3.5% of my damage. So Oh, actually, there's a 1.1% down there also. So 4.6% of my damage from immolation aura. Whoop-de-doo. Oh, and obviously in boss fights, that's gonna be even lower since it's AoE damage. So yeah, there's some things in the tree, but I think the I-beam guaranteed crits is pretty important, and the Glaive Tempest, the Essence Break, and the crit damage equal to crit chance are probably the other more important things. Yeah. Nothing else too exciting. Nothing that really changes too much how you play apart from the Vengeful Retreat thing is giving you 80 Fury over 10 seconds. Let's see. The tree on the left. The hunt is nice. I don't like any of this sigil crap on the right edge of the tree. It's sort of a playstyle that's kind of pushed onto the tank spec, which is the Vengeance Demon Hunter. But I hate having to like target the stupid sigils on the ground and stuff. There's some talent where all sigils are now placed at your location or at your target's location. So it could be sort of viable to do this, but these are really just quality of life things that I feel like them putting this quality of life into a talent means that if you skip the quality of life thing, then you'll be more powerful. And I think that feels really bad. There's a thing about their duration though, so I don't know. Maybe it's not fair to say it's purely a quality of life thing. But yeah, I'm not a fan of the sigil stuff. So because of that, I'm not really a fan of the Vengeance Demon Hunter tanking at all. Also, the sigil stuff is not the only real one for damage that you get here is Sigil of Flame. The Vengeance Demon Hunter has one on the Vengeance tree that does damage, which was like a Kyrian Covenant power or something. But for a Havoc Demon Hunter, the Sigil of Flame is your only one that's you're really gonna consider getting, essentially, that does damage. There's like a silence one over here or something also, but but that's fire damage, which we already looked at. The mastery gives you more chaos damage, so in order to keep as much of your damage as chaos as possible, it doesn't really make sense to get a fire damage sigil. Similarly, for trinkets, I have this trinket which gives me shadow damage,
At your service.
which I am pretty good at using a lot. Where is it at? Spectral Scythe, 3.7% of my damage. And then there's also this Whisper of Death, which I think is the AoE part of it, which is 0.7% of my damage. So 4.4% of my damage from this trinket. But if you wanted to get more value out of mastery, you would not want this portion of your damage being shadow damage. You'd rather have a trinket that just buffs your stats so that you do more chaos damage. So, yeah, something to consider.
Anchors away.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, you want to get the hunt. I really like the whole I-beam. It causes you to enter demon form for 6 seconds after it finishes dealing damage. I'm not sure how much that actually matters, but specifically it has synergy with these talents over here where entering demon form and leaving demon form gives you a buff. So since I plan to get those when I have more points, then I will be getting more value out of this talent point as opposed to getting the other one or spending it somewhere else. Here's where Metamorphosis cooldown's reduced. This does not have any prerequisite. So as long as you've unlocked this part of the tree, you can spend your point there to get this. Which is kind of weird. Some of the trees have something like this. Like the Evoker had something like this. But yeah, that's... I feel like that makes a big difference as for making it feel like you should use Metamorphosis more often. But I'm still not very fond of the way Metamorphosis works as far as it being a very long duration thing. And I don't like the haste thing. So it's I do wish it worked differently. I never mentioned Fellblade. So Fellblade generates it's this little charge attack thing that you probably saw me use sometimes after I did the retreat, where you charge in, generates a bunch of fury for you. So the Demon's Bite generates a random amount of 25 to 40 fury, which I hate that it's a random amount. Also, I hate that there's a random chance for Chaos Strike to refund fury. I think both of those random... I think the random type of system's retarded. Much more of a fan of, like, Warrior, Fury Warrior, where it's like, this always generates this much fury. Although I think crits can give it more amount. But I mean, 25 to 40 fury is just too much randomness. But anyways, Fellblade is a fairly short cooldown little charge attack which gives you 40 fury. So that's enough for a Chaos Strike. So it's a little bit better than Demon's Bite. So it's something that you do want to use a lot. But overall damage that it does is pretty low. 0.5% of my overall damage. So yeah. But as a talent I do like the playstyle of it. Because obviously you can charge to your target a lot with Fell Rush, but Fell Rush is a set distance, so if your target's this far away and you Fell Rush, then you have to turn around to face them to hit them. Whereas if you use Fell Blade, it'll just jump like right to their face and you don't have to turn around or anything. And also the Fell Rush doesn't generate fury for you. So yeah. I like the Fell Blade talent. Yeah, I don't think anything else is too
At your service.
important, really. Yeah. So yeah. Most of your damage ends up being Glaive Tempest, Eye Beam, Essence Break for your bursty AoE damage. And then followed by Chaos Strike is your main single target thing. But also Annihilation is on here farther down. Annihilation is what Chaos Strike is like renamed to when you're in the demon form. So combined, those end up being more damage than Essence Break. Got Fell Rush on here because of that talent where when you use the Immolation Aura, your next Fell Rush does 500% extra damage. We got our auto attacks on here. Fell Devastation is from this talent down here, where every time you Eye Beam, you get another guy next to you doing extra damage as well. So that single talent point ends up being a total of 5.3% of my damage, so definitely a talent point worth spending. Trail of Ruin damage over time is 3.9% of my damage. That's the one over here. The Blade Dance damage over time one. And Spectral Scythe is that trinket I was using. It does mostly single target damage with a little bit of AoE damage. Immolation Aura is on there. Not great, but it doesn't hurt to press it. It doesn't like cost fury. It actually generates 20 fury. So even if you didn't have the talent for making the Fell Rush better, it's still a button that you're gonna press, even without wrong ones. Even without getting extra Immolation Aura talents. What do I want? This. Demon's Bites, our Fury Generator. Very small amount of our total damage. The Hunt is a very small amount of our total damage. The Hunt has it damages the target, but it also does this AoE damage over time to enemies on the way to your target. So the damage over time part ends up being a higher percent of the damage than the single target damage. And either it's not a ton of damage, and it's on a 1.5 minute cooldown, so it doesn't amount to be a large percentage of our damage, but it's still a very worthwhile thing to use when you're not like to initiate type of thing, basically. Then we got Death Sweep on here. Death Sweep's the demon form version of Blade Dance. So Death Sweep and Blade Dance, you can kind of combine all that damage together to see that it's like 8% or so of my total damage, not including the Trail of Ruin talent, which was 3.9% of the damage. So Yeah, lots of little things that sort of add up. But single target damage ends up being mostly annihilation / chaos strike, the eye beam, the audio attacks, the glaive tempest, the essence break, and the blade dance stuff. Yeah. I don't have anything more that I really want to talk about for this class. It's very strong. Grand scheme of things, you know, I'm doing decent damage compared to other classes which have a lot of eye levels on me. But I get bored of this class very easily. It's kind of fun to zoom around a little bit, do lots of very high burst AoE damage, but I do a couple dungeons on it and then I get bored. So I don't think I'm really gonna play this class in Dragonflight. I'll level it up eventually, probably, but I wouldn't put it in like my top 5, for example, of what I wanted to play. So yeah, that's how it is.